Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
To remove the wheel cover, just take a small pry bar or a large flat-bladed screwdriver, get under the edge. It'll pop right off, and put that aside. Before you remove the axle nut, you need to unstake it. There's no cotter pin, it's actually pinched in there so it can't spin off. So you take a punch, you slide it into the opening, and a hammer. You use a 30mm 12-point socket to remove the axle nut and a long breaker bar. I like to do this with the vehicle on the ground because if you try to do this while the wheel and tire is off of it, you can rock the car off of the jack stands because it does take a lot of torque to get these off. And you'd also have to have somebody holding the brake to keep the axle from spinning while you try to turn it off. So by having the wheel and tire on while you do it, nothing's going to move. You're just going to loosen the nut. Make sure you get it pretty loose. So you're going to spray some rust penetrant in here. Just want to give quite a few turns because once it's in the air, you want to be able to, you want to make sure you can take it off by hand. With the vehicle on the ground, use a 21mm socket and a long breaker bar to loosen the lug nuts. You can raise and support your vehicle using a jack and jack stands. We're going to use our 2-post lift. You can use the socket to finish taking off the lug nuts and remove your tire and wheel and put it aside. I'm going to hold on to the wheel because it's coming loose. I don't want it to fall as I take off the last lug nut. There it is. Take the wheel and tire off, put it aside. This axle nut off. So one thing I want to do before I disconnect the knuckle from the strut while this is all tight, I want to hit on the end of this axle with my dead blow just to make sure that it comes free. Sometimes they get bound up on these splines, a little bit of rust, so we'll use some rust penetrant. And don't worry about it if this drips down the rotors, we'll clean it up at the very end with brake parts cleaner. So we're just gonna hit on this. So that's moving. That's good, so it's gonna come free. When I go to pull this down, it will separate from the inside of the hub. You need to remove the 12mm bolt that's holding on the ABS line to the bracket and the rubber brake hose to the bracket. This way I can separate this knuckle and move it out and it won't be caught. I'm also going to unclip the ABS line from the strut. So spray a little bit of rust penetrant on here. I'm going to use a 12mm ratcheting wrench, loosen it up. Pull this out of here. Use the clip removal tool, pry this out. The bolt and the nut are both 22mm for both of these that are holding the knuckle to the strut. So we're going to loosen up the nut first, spray some rust penetrant on here. Use a 22mm socket and a long ratchet. Carefully don't smash this into the fender. So loosen this up. If the bolt starts to spin, you can counter hold it with a 22mm box wrench. This one's moving free, so I don't need to do that. So I'm going to loosen up both the same way. So I'm just going to spin these off. You can push in on the knuckle a little bit, wiggle it around. Bolts will come right out. Same for both of them. There it is. This will lower and come out. So you carefully feed this out, and the axle is already separating from the hub. I'm feeding it out from the back. And we'll just put it aside just like that. The bottom of this car has a large plastic under tray. I'm going to try to remove just some of the clips just so I can have a little better access to get a pry bar up here and pop that CV axle out. So we'll start with a flat bladed screwdriver, pop these down, get them started. Use a trim clip tool, pry them out. Just slide the pry bar up between the frame rail and towards the transmission, and just sort of catch the edge of the CV axle. I've got the pry bar, there's a little tiny edge. I'll have to show you after I get this out. I've got it on the edge of it, and I'm going to hit it with a ball peen hammer to try to knock it out. So I'm putting the pry bar in, there's an edge right here on the edge of the axle. I'm going to pry against that. There it is. You're going to want to have a drain pan here ready. Some transmission fluid might come out. Guide it out of the transmission. Yeah, so it's loose. There it is. Pull it out of the transmission. There it is. Guide it out of the transmission. There's our CV axle. We're going to reuse the original axle because this one was fine. We just want to show you how to take it out. So we'll slide it back in. Be careful not to damage the seal. Maneuver it in. I have to turn it a little bit to line up the splines. And then, once it's lined up, take the dead blow and hit it home. And put it back into the knuckle. You may have to turn it. It should slide in. You can hook this back up. The knuckle to the strut. Get the bolts caught. To wiggle this around. Just use some brake parts cleaner, clean up any spilled transmission fluid. So we can check for leaks later. I'm just going to toss the nut on here for now so it doesn't come out. Install the strut bolt nuts. Spin those down. Snug them up, and then come back and torque them. Torque these to 177 foot-pounds. Once it clicks, you're all set. Do the same for both. If the bolt starts to turn on you, you can counter hold it, but these are in there pretty tight. Put the brake hose back into the bracket, and the ABS wire will go here. We'll reinstall the bolt. Tighten the bolt back up. You don't want to over tighten it so it might break, so just feel it get tight, stop. And then push the plastic clip back in for the ABS wire. Snug the axle nut up. Reinstall the wheel now. We'll lower the vehicle to the ground, torque this nut, and then we'll stake it. Start the lug nuts by hand. These do have a shoulder to them. The shoulder fits on the inside of the wheel, so they are both, the wheel is both hub-centric and lug-centric. So if you're having trouble getting these to thread down, you might have to wobble the wheel around a bit. Reinstall any plastic clips you took down to get the shield off. I'm going to torque the lug nuts in a cross pattern to 77 foot-pounds. Torque the axle nut to 159 foot-pounds. So now we just need to stake the axle nut, take a punch, and punch it into the little divot. Put the hubcap back on, line up the opening valve stem, just push it into place.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.